Today, we will continue cause and effect. We're going to complete an article with cause and effect questions on the history of the telephone. Before we get started, we are going to go into IXL and look at a cause and effect situation. But before that, let's look at what is a cause and what is an effect. Cause and effect is when one thing happens due to another thing happening. Some clue words could be because, so, as a result, due to, if, then, and since. Here's our cause and effect anchor chart. The cause is why something happens, and the effect is what happened. Our first example, Kevin did not pay attention in class. That was the cause. Therefore, which is one of our keywords, he did not understand the assignment. As a result, he did not score well on the test. So the keywords are therefore and as a result that we're looking for. Let's take a look at the IXL activity. We're going to read the text. Have you ever wondered how bees make honey? First, a bee collects watery nectar from flowers. Then the bee stores it in a special honey stomach or sac. When the sac fills up, the bee returns to the hive. The bees then pass the nectar from bee to bee using their mouths. Passing the nectar causes the water to drop out. This slowly changes the nectar into honey. We're going to match the cause with their effect. So, bees pass the nectar. Nectar fills the honey sac. So what is the cause? What is the effect? Well, the effect says the bee goes back to the hive. Why would they go back? What would be the cause of them going back to the hive? The nectar filled the honey sac. Very good. The nectar turns into honey. Well, the cause would be bees pass the nectar. So now we are going to go into our lesson. We're going to read the article, Telephone History. While reading it, I want you to think about these questions that we'll be working on together, and then you will be working on in a Google Form exit ticket. Explain what effect the first phone had on human communication. How did it change the way people lived? Explain what effects smartphones had on human communication. Use examples from the text and from real life. Okay, we'll go to the text next. And we'll be reading about telephone history. Telephone history. Follow along as I read. You might not think about phones very much, but you can't always communicate with people as easily. Prior to telephones or phones, people had to communicate through writing letters or talking face to face. This kind of communication took a long time to get answers and solve problems. In 1876, Alexander Graham Bell invented the first telephone. This telephone looked far different from the telephones we use today. There were not any telephone numbers, and people used an operator to connect to other people. Telephone numbers were not used until 1879. All of these phones were landlines. Landlines are phones that use wires connected to the wall. In 1965, cordless phones were invented. Cordless phones still had to stay within the house, but there was not a cord connected to the phone. The caller was free to move around the house. The first mobile phone was invented in 1973. This phone weighed almost 5 pounds. A mobile phone is a phone that is not attached to the wall. A mobile phone is also called a cell phone. Cell phones started to become more popular in the late 1900s. In the early 2000s, cell phones became smaller and cameras were added. In 2007, the first smartphone was released. Smartphones allowed people to do just about anything you can do on the internet. People have changed a lot since they were first invented. Phones have changed a lot since they were first invented. Phones are used to communicate in more ways than just talking. You can send emails, shop, text, and surf the web on phones now. So let's go back to our question. Our question said, explain what effect the first phone had on communication. How did it change the way people lived? Well, if we go back into the text, we can see that before people started to use telephones, people communicated through writing letters or talking face to face. So if we go back into our slides, and it says, explain what effect the first phone had on human communication. How did it change the way people lived? Well, we need to start out with a complete sentence. And I'm going to make sure it's bolded so you can see it. The effect the first phone had on human communication. That's how people talk with each other. Was people did not have to write notes, and communication became quicker. It changed the way people lived because they could solve problems quicker. Because in the article, it said, this kind of communication took a long time to get answers and to solve problems. So communication was slower. Next question. Explain what effects the smartphone had on communication. Use examples from the text and from real life. Well, the effects smartphones had on communication was it allowed people to do almost anything on the internet. If we go back into the text, it says, in 2007, the first smartphone was released. Smartphones allow people to do just about anything you can do on the internet. Also, if we look back, we can see it talking about cell phones, but be careful because the question asks, what do smartphones allow people to do? So that's why this piece of information needs to be used, and not maybe saying that the camera was added to a cell phone and it became smaller, because that was talking about cell phones, not smartphones. Okay, so let's go back in and type our answer to this question. And let's make sure we're using complete sentences. I'm going to put it in bold. Maybe I can even make this a little bit bigger for us. If I do that, though, do you know what I'll do? I'll make this one bigger because it's the one we're working on. Okay, the effects that smartphones had on human communication, making sure I'm using a complete sentence, was it allowed people to do almost anything on the internet. And right here, if we look back, It allowed people to do just about anything you could do on the internet. You can do on the internet. So it was like using a computer, but on a phone. So your job is to go now and complete the Google form. We've done the 2 questions together. Now it's your job to go back and show that you watched the video. So Ms. Fogelman or Ms. Soto or Ms. Dolby will be able to see that you watched the entire lesson by how you answer your questions on the Google form. Please let us know if you need help or have any questions.